Okay, so week 3, day 3, we're talking about unrealistic expectations, still under the same theme of reality check. So making sure that we're identifying things at face value with the story that we tell ourselves. The goal of understanding unrealistic expectations and maybe like when we're in a place of having them is because we don't want to set ourselves up for disappointment. Generally, when we get disappointed because we're attached to outcomes, we take it out on people, and that's not fun to be in a relationship like that. And it'll help us identify how we're being experienced and kind of what the culprit is of the outcome that we're going through, right?
Right.
So, Kyle, will read the definition.
Definition is an unreasonable belief from an objective perspective. And so, since we have a difficulty being objective about ourselves, that's why it's just important to be aware of that. And then hopefully you can start realizing, when you're creating these unrealistic expectations and putting them on other people without communicating them.
Yeah, I mean, so because we show up, we don't realize we're having an unrealistic expectation until, time after time after time, we continue to get disappointed. Generally, like there's a pattern of it. I mentioned before that you can find them in your relationships. So it always comes up for Kyle and I because we are mirrors for each other. And so we'll tend to argue or have a disagreement about something specific. And when it becomes a pattern, we have made this, rules of engagement and have identified that when something like that continues to surface, that we're going to evaluate if it's an unrealistic expectation and then whose is that, right?
Right.
Part of being aware of how people experience us and how we're experiencing other people is by taking the ownership in the story that we're telling ourselves. And if that matches up with the objective view that we have, we can only assume that we have an objective view based on the feedback that we hear from other people. And so that's why it's important to have people that you trust, right? We talked a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's a lot of important, I guess I'll use the word nuanced things with this, because we talk a lot about, words are easy sometimes, and people's actions usually represent what they're more likely to do going forward. And so, there's a lot of people that don't really know their objective reality, and then they'll tell you something different than what you can really expect from them. And so if you don't learn to believe either yourself or other people about what their actions show, you can be disappointed because you're basing your own expectations on your own reality rather than their reality and what they're telling you it is. It's a lot of words, so I don't...
Yeah. I think when it comes to unrealistic expectations, it's important for us to just get in the process of starting to, where do we look for them at? Unrealistic expectations and limiting beliefs are, kind of similar. They pop up together often. And so what I find is that I usually have both, right? I usually have this limiting belief first, and then there's an unrealistic expectation behind it that even though, my belief is keeping me down, I expect things to always work out or never work out. It's often in like absolutes, right? Like we have these absolute beliefs. Like every time I get up to hit a softball, I'm gonna fucking smash it. Like that's unrealistic. Every time Kyle and I go out on a date, like we're gonna have a wonderful time, because life happens. And so if we can identify, or just come to the conclusion that we have these unrealistic expectations, they're normal. Everybody has them. They're based on our experience, and a lot, more times than not, it's these adopted beliefs that we pick from culture or families or things that don't actually work for our situation that we're in now, right? So not just like the times change, but people change and our community changes. And so having this flexibility with how we think is very important. Keeping ourselves accountable with the story that we're telling ourselves and being willing and open to change that story, that's how we're going to be successful.
Yeah. So one of the things that I had to do when I started evaluating this was, I think a lot of times in absolutes, at least with myself, and often, I just have an expectation of a kind of constant out there with everybody doing what I expect, and then I'm disappointed when, that's how I used to be. Now I think of it as in like probabilities, on a spectrum. what are the odds that everything's going to go my way every day all the time? Probably pretty much zero. And so, um, if I know that going into my day, then I'm going to be more prepared to deal with things and just not react emotionally to when things don't go my way. And I just kind of problem solve and go, okay, accepted, this is happening. Getting mad about it's not going to help. How do I, because in my reaction to getting either mad or just disappointment or whatever is not going to help. And so, it's okay. We all feel that, but it's really about managing your visceral reactions to situations. These expectations come with, in our head, come with feelings in our body. And those are uncomfortable and unproductive sometimes if they're not based in reality. These are survival instincts that we experience. And if we can manage those with our real life instead of, what our life was based on a long time ago, which is where our physiological body still experiences, it can be helpful, and it's just a practice. It's being aware of how this and here relates to this up here, and our thoughts and our feelings and the people in the world around us.
Yeah, and a lot of times why we get attached to expectations or the result of something is because we're not trusting the situation, or we're not trusting the person we're engaging with, or we don't trust ourselves. And so if you're not trusting the story that you're telling yourself from the beginning, it's easier to have unrealistic and absolute expectations all the time. And so if you can buy into this idea that we're doing it based on this untrust network where we just inherently don't trust people around us because we're having a hard time connecting with people because of everything that's going on in our environment, it just opens up the door so that it gives us a reason, because we talked about how we need reasons to change what we're doing. And so just realizing that, or trying to piece that story together. Kyle and I just give you options and we tell you what works for us, but really the legwork is on your side. And so we kind of lay the information out there, and what you can grab onto, it's worth it. And so your story might look different than mine and with Kyle's, but the idea is that we're not holding on to the expectations or the results, right? We're just working with life and co-creating with other things. And when we get into relationships, this is one of the most important skills to have, is because if something doesn't go right between Kyle and I, it gives us the opportunity to reframe it, right? We need to reframe it. We need to reframe the story and change what we're telling ourselves so that we're okay with what's going on in our reality.
Right. And, for us, it's often, one of us is able to help the other one, to reframe it by just, checking, if you will, checking in, being like, are you okay? Are you angry? And giving an alternative perspective to a situation. When there's, like, why were you expecting that? We can see it in each other sometimes. And one of the other things, I lost it.
Yeah, well, so it comes back to needs, right? So like all my expectations are based on my needs being met, or based on me meeting the needs. And so knowing I'm able to communicate to Kyle, like, I really need some help, like I need help with a workaround for this belief, or I need you to help me reframe this because I'm struggling with it. And you'll know when you're struggling because you're not feeling good. You're feeling anxiety, you're feeling anger, you're feeling disappointment. And so me having trust with myself, that I do, I believe myself to ask for help, and then trusting Kyle that he's going to help me, then he can offer me more solutions than what I can come up with because of my own experiences in reality. And, this is why all of this information came first before we're even talking about, how you are in relationships, because you need to have a system of how to change and reframe and evaluate and identify what you're doing, and then what your partner's doing, and then how you guys interact together. So.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing I want to say is just, everybody's different, right? Mm-hmm. We all have our own different experiences, but more likely than not, somebody out there has gone through something similar, or has, and people have related experiences, maybe they don't have the exact same set of circumstances that made you feel a certain way, but something similar that you can relate to. So when you're feeling alone or something, it's important to go talk to other people and get, some relatability, some connection, and that can help you to, they can help you with how they manage their expectations. You know, it's not a frequently talked about thing in our culture, but I think if you bring it up, people will understand.
Okay, that's it for today.